Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
I'm good. The bigger question, of course, is how are you, having spent a weekend at Glastonbury?
I've been better. Who would have thought that 4 days of partying and sleeping in a field would eventually catch up with me?
I don't know.
It's not like I've shown any preclusion or vulnerability to illness in the past, so I should be fine, I imagine. I feel pretty ropey today. I seem to have acquired some sort of cold.
Oh no!
Let's call it that. Let's say I've got a cold.
Just a cold, because you know what else could happen when you're in a fairly enclosed space with 250,000 people? Is it that many? How many people go to it?
Something like that.
That's
some mad stat about it's the most densely populated city in the world or something at that particular moment in time.
Yikes.
It was amazing. I'd never been before. I'd always sort of taken it in from my sofa, which is a good vantage point, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it was very cool to get the chance to go, and sort of a bit of a bucket list thing. So had a great time, but I'm paying for it now.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, the other big question is, how were the Sugababes?
Do you know what, Andrew?
No.
I didn't get into the Sugababes.
No.
Yeah, the Sugababes was incredibly oversubscribed.
Right. Hang on. Do you have to put your name down or something, or do you just turn up and they say, well, there's no more room?
Basically, it was that. They closed a road, a walkway through to that venue because they were like, we're not letting anyone else in there.
Oh, no.
Yeah, crazy. It was a massive crowd. And I think you forget how big Glastonbury is, but you know, sometimes if you try and get from one show to another in less than 45 minutes, it's a struggle. So Sugababes, I had to let it go. Tough one. But
you didn't get to push the button with the Sugababes.
I didn't get to push the button, but I did get to say, man, I feel like a woman with Shania Twain.
You're still the one, James. You're still the
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Shania was also incredibly busy. I don't think I saw another act that was busier than that. I think she was in the sweet spot, that legend spot on the bill.
Right.
Kind of protect it by not putting much up against it. And wow, it was a sea of cowboy hats and leopard print.
Right.
And I was right in the middle of it.
We had a lot of that in Dublin this weekend because we had Taylor Swift in Dublin for 3 or 4 nights. So town was just basically full of people wearing cowboy hats, sparkly cowboy boots and sparkly dresses and things. So yeah, there's been a lot of that going on. Who else did you see that was good, that caught your eye?
Oh man, I saw a lot of good stuff. I got to say, for a sort of nostalgia hit, speaking about Sugababes and Shania Twain, Avril Lavigne was pretty great.
Oh, no way.
It was an incredible gig because it was basically just a lot of people reliving their teenage years. But she could actually really play and sing, so it was really good fun. And then I saw London Grammar, who I'm not necessarily a massive fan of, but as in I wouldn't seek them out ordinarily, but it was kind of one of those where I was up on this hill and they happened to be playing and I just watched somebody else, and they played this amazing set sort of as the sun went down over the hill behind me. It was really, really beautiful, quite sort of haunting. And that was a really great moment to be part of a crowd for something that was genuinely quite transcendently beautiful, you know. So they were amazing. A rapper called Gets, who I really like, was very good. I'm always a bit on the fence about rap live. It can really work, or it can also not work. And I think as a performer, you need quite a lot of energy and clarity to sort of carry it off in a festival environment, a field essentially. Yeah. But he really did that, and his set is definitely worth checking out. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing, I got to tell you, man, I went to the Healing Fields, which is, I don't know if you know, but that's what it sounds like. It's basically a load of tents with sort of shamans in them. And you go in and you pay 20 quid and they tell you how you're going to die or whatever it might be.
Right.
But there was this one woman who, her thing was called the Magical Mystery Box. And all the other...
Is that legal?
I don't. And a lot of palm readers and, tarot card readers.
Sure.
And they all had big queues. But Magical Mystery Box Lady didn't have a big queue. Okay. So I wandered over and I said to her, well, what is it? How does it work? She goes, well, what it is, there's a load of items in the box. You pull out an item, and then if you've got a problem in your life, we sort of figure out the answer together.
Right.
And I was like, what do you mean we? What do I have to do? I've got to pay you for me to do this? And then she just went, yeah, it's a bit of fun. And I was like, right, well, forget it then.
Oh, no, you didn't do it?
No, I didn't do it. But I feel like if you're claiming to be magic and then 30 seconds into the pitch, you go, that's just a bit of fun. Then
yeah, I suppose it breaks the illusion, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I wanted the real deal. But yeah, it was great, man. Lots of Arsenal fans there. Louis Dunford played.
Yeah, saw that. Yeah,
I didn't actually get to it, but I heard that it was packed out with Arsenal fans. And on that day, I think it was the Saturday. Yeah, basically the whole festival was people in sort of retro Arsenal shirts. You could see them everywhere you moved, which was cool.
Yeah, we had one of our Discord members, Captain Meg, said, went to see Louis Dunford at Glastonbury on Saturday. The tent was like the Tollington. So many Gooners. He didn't even have to sing the chorus of The Angel. Amazing moment and a great show. So
apparently before the gig, it was just fans singing different Arsenal songs. So yeah, very, very cool. And I think he absolutely loved it as well, from what I gather. Yeah, I think it was a great experience for him. But yeah, really fun. I would honestly say, if it's something you've ever considered doing, it's a great thing to do at least once. It's that thing there where I had such a great time that on the one hand, I'm like, oh, I'll go back every year. On the other hand, I'm like, well, I went, it wasn't muddy, and I didn't die. And I think, in a way, declare on that.
Isn't that as much as anyone is looking for from their Glastonbury experience? Didn't die, didn't get trench foot, and had a great time. And you didn't get a chance to sort of perform your newest hit on a banjo to Dua Lipa or anything like that? No?
No, my God, that guy. If you haven't seen that video, you must seek it out.
Oh, well, it depends on how well you can deal with cringe.
That's true. I love that. If someone tells me, oh, so-and-so had a bad gig, my instinct is I must immediately watch that. So it's like I have that kind of attraction to car crashes. But yeah, for those who don't know, essentially he was a guy going around with, I think it's a banjo, some sort of
ukulele type
small
thing,
guitar-shaped object. And he spent the entire weekend sort of accosting people and playing and singing at them.
Dua Lipa was one of those, and she didn't last very long, to be fair. She smiled politely and wandered off, but it was just like, oh my God, my toes are curling here.
Yeah, I spoke to someone and they were camping near that guy, I think, and they were like, yeah, he was literally doing it all weekend.
Oh no, no.
Yeah. But yeah, have you heard from Andrew Allen? Has he returned in one piece?
Yes, Andrew Allen returned from One Piece. I think he came back late on the Sunday, so
right.
He sort of avoided the mayhem of getting out of there on the Monday, but he had a great time as well. I think he too is probably a bit tired. I didn't hear his voice. We've only been sort of texting on chat things and stuff like that, so it's hard to tell from somebody's typing whether or not they've got a cold or whether they've lost their voice, but he seemed to have a good time as well. And yeah, well,
Correct.
all in all, a great weekend. Did you get any chance to keep up with the football while you were there?
Well,
obviously, there were some big games going on. Yeah.
Previous years, I think in the past, once or twice, they have shown the football at Glastonbury, but
right.
This year they did not do so. And actually, reception is very patchy. So
that's what Andrew said. Actually, yeah, there was very little sort of 4 or 5G or anything like that.
So what happened was, I was actually not at Twain, and then I was on my way to see Avril Lavigne, and I managed to catch most of the first half on my phone as I sort of joined a procession of people trying to get into Avril Lavigne. And then once that gig started and the second half kicked off, we had nothing basically. And then what happened was she finished on Skater Boy, of course, one of her classics.
Yeah.
And as soon as she went off stage, Jude Bellingham scored an overhead kick and someone near me got a text. And so she got her kind of roar of approval, and then there was a sort of secondary roar, and then over the PA they played Hey Jude, and as everyone flooded away, they kind of joined in with the song. So it was quite a nice way to experience the game, and I gather a much better way than actually trying to watch it, because the first 96 minutes or so weren't great by all accounts.
No, it was not good. It was not good from England. It was an amazing moment from Jude Bellingham and an incredible way to salvage England's tournament hopes, but it was just kind of, it was really bad, actually, I have to say. Talked about this on our Euros pod over on Patreon, but just the inaction from Gareth Southgate from the bench was absolutely crazy. There were players he could have brought on but didn't bring on. Ivan Toney he brought on with like 2 minutes of the 6 minutes of injury time to go, and said afterwards that Toney was disgusted at him for doing that, even if Toney, later played a part in England's winning goal. The idea that you leave Kyle Walker on the pitch and don't bring on Trent Alexander-Arnold when all you're doing is slinging in crosses made no sense, above and beyond how terrible Kyle Walker was on the day anyway. And it was just really, really poor. And I think that moment of inspiration or moment of quality from Jude Bellingham has saved Gareth Southgate from some of the most intense media scrutiny. Like, I think it would have gone back to the days, the tabloids would have gone full Graham Taylor on Gareth Southgate. The whole turnip type thing. What would
they have compared him to?
Celeriac. I don't know.
Wow.
Butternut squash. I really don't know, but it would have been really bad, I think. And I'm not saying anyone deserves to be turned into a root vegetable on the back of the Sun or the Mirror or anything like that, but certainly he would have had no excuse to avoid the sort of criticism and scrutiny that he would have been subjected to. Again, Trent Alexander-Arnold not coming off the bench, Ollie Watkins not coming off the bench at all, Anthony Gordon not coming off the bench at all, despite the fact that, Phil Foden had another really poor game. It was just, I was watching, I couldn't quite believe it. I really couldn't quite believe why it was when England were desperately looking for a goal and looked like they just could have been there all day without scoring, he didn't change anything. I'm still slightly baffled as to why. I think the suggestion, you leave Jude Bellingham on because he can always give you that, fair enough. But the fact he didn't make other changes was really strange to me.
Yeah. I'm looking at the list of substitutes now. Cole Palmer on 66, and then...
But that's because Trippier got injured.
Right, and then nothing until 84.
Yeah.
When he brought Eze on, and then Toney, 94th minute.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, England absolutely got away with it there. Jude Bellingham dug them out. I mean, Andrew, am I crazy? But I just feel like England have been so bad. I mean, of course, England have been so bad that, there's every chance Switzerland go and beat them at the weekend.
Yeah.
Switzerland have actually looked quite good. But there is part of me, I have to admit, that's like there's something sort of oddly fluky and fated about the fact that England are even still in the tournament at this point in time. And the draw, you have to say, has been incredibly kind to them. Yeah,
I mean, it's been a weird tournament in that respect because I think, a couple of teams have been good. I think Germany have been good, Spain have been good, but they're facing each other in the next game.
Yeah.
Whereas I think France have been pretty poor.
Yeah, they've been disappointing.
They really have. I mean, look, I think defensively yesterday they were really good. Saliba was amazing. And I think across the back four, Koundé, Upamecano and Theo Hernandez, they were all excellent. But it's just kind of mad when you look at France and you look at the sheer amount of quality, attacking options, midfield options that they have, that they are leaning into this, will just be really difficult to beat and nick a goal somewhere along the way. I think it's 2 own goals and a penalty, 3 goals in 4 games. France have not been good. Portugal, I mean, did you watch any of that last night?
I did. The circus came to town in the form of Cristiano Ronaldo.
It's unbelievable really is. I mean, the way his ego and narcissism is being indulged by Portugal is ridiculous. Above and beyond whatever personal criticism you want to level at him, the crying after missing the penalty, what kind of leadership is that? I mean, it's just not any kind of leadership from a senior player. But his insistence on making every single thing about him, the free kick taking, it's just ridiculous. Roberto Martinez has zero backbone whatsoever when it comes to this team. And they're through and probably shouldn't be through. Our friend Benjamin Sesko missed a couple of really good chances for Slovenia. But Portugal, France, England, they could chunder their way to a European win here. It's not beyond the realms of impossibility that a team that's played really badly all the way through, or certainly not to the level that people would have expected given the respective talents that they have in their squad, could go on and win it by just being barely functional.
Yeah, and I think there is some precedent, isn't there, for teams that are, defensively quite well organised and stable going through and winning tournaments. I mean... Greece did it at the Euros, didn't they? Even playing that kind of style of football. And as bad as England have been, and they have been bad, I think defensively there are at least some foundations there. France have been really good, I think, defensively.
Yeah.
Spain do look like the best team, probably, at this point in time. But, they're a young team, and who knows how they'll cope when they get to the latter stages of the tournament. But it is a strange one. It's not been one where, a team has necessarily come forward that you're like, wow, they look like champions straight away. So, yeah, and the draw, I think, plays into that. I think some teams that have been pretty poor will go pretty deep, and England could be among them. They
could. We had a question here from Gibbsinho on the Discord. What did you make of BBC cheekily putting Mistiano Penaldo at the bottom of the screen when showing the replay of Ronaldo's penalty miss? It wasn't even at the end of the game. I thought this was quite disrespectful. Whatever you think of the man, he clearly gives it all for his team. I mean, I would take serious issue with that, Gibbsinho. I think he plays for himself rather than playing for the team. I think that has been part and parcel of Cristiano Ronaldo's oeuvre for quite a long time. It's first and foremost all about him, and everything else is secondary, and it comes to the detriment of Portugal, I think, in this tournament, and certainly in the game last night. He should not have done 120 minutes on that pitch. Now,
I do wonder what the likes of Bruno Fernandes or Bernardo Silva make of it all, Yeah,
I had a chat with Lewis about that this morning on our Europod over on Patreon. I don't like Bruno Fernandes, as I'm sure many Arsenal fans listening to this don't like Bruno Fernandes. But when there's a free kick in an area, like a couple of the ones that he had yesterday, and same with Bernardo Silva, he's a much better option for Portugal. So, why is Ronaldo being indulged at this point of his career? If he's 29 at the peak of his powers, whatever, but he's 39 and playing in Saudi and not really at the competitive level that you need to perform at a high-level European international tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's looked entirely out of place in this tournament. I think I think there's still quality there. But if you speak to people in Portugal, there are, whatever you may hear from the crowd and sort of who seem absolutely infatuated with him during games, I think there are plenty of sensible people in Portugal who think the team should have maybe moved on 2 or 3 years ago. But everything at the moment is just geared around him. I mean, the most absurd moment I thought last night was when Portugal had a free kick out wide, a great crossing position, and Ronaldo was lining up for a shot. And the referee, I think, went over and actually said, no, it's from even further wide than that. And he still shot anyway.
I mean, why isn't he in the box? Because whatever else you might say about him, and there's lots of things you could say about him, and some of which we can't, but he's a fantastic header of the ball. And if you've got players like Bruno Fernandes or Bernardo Silva who can put in the quality delivery into the box that a great header of the ball can attack, that strikes me as a much better opportunity to score a goal than trying to whack it in from 40 yards, miles out on the touchline, because you just want to do something spectacular. You want to show off.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I don't think there's a logical explanation for that. Really, I think he's got worse, hasn't he, in that respect, as he's aged. The sort of megalomania within him has grown and grown to the point where it feels like at this point in his career, it's all about his legacy. It's all about stat padding, records, what laurels can I add to my name rather than the team's. I saw last night somebody said, Ronaldo's, after he missed the penalty, and what a brilliant save that was by Oblak, by the way. Ronaldo's tears for Portugal. And I thought, I don't think they're tears for Portugal at all.
No,
I think they're tears from South.
Yeah.
It's just a shame Slovenia couldn't hold their nerve in the shootout, but credit to Diogo Costa. I mean, he played very well as well.
Yeah, I mean, he made good saves. I think the penalties were kind of perfect for a goalkeeper, and I don't think Slovenia's penalties were good.
They weren't good height, were they, most of the time?
Nah, they were perfect for the goalkeeper if he goes the right way. It makes it not easy for him to make the save, but 3 penalties almost exactly the same, and they were credit to the goalkeeper. Of course, he makes 3 saves in a penalty shootout. He deserves a lot of credit, but I think you look at the penalty. Was it the one Bruno Fernandes scored? That's a really good penalty take. He is a really good penalty taker, and Jan Oblak is an incredible goalkeeper, and he just did him completely. Oblak never even moved. So there is a technique that came to the fore in the penalty shootout. I think the penalties that Portugal took, including one from Ronaldo, were good, but the Slovenian penalties were not good. But like you said, probably good for Sesko to remain in Leipzig for another year.
Yeah, I think I saw a question about him. Ian Jenkinson said, have we dodged a bullet in Sesko? He had pretty poor Euros in the end. What did you make of him overall?
Not ready for what we need right now. That's my takeaway. I think there are obviously some good qualities to him. I think he is quite raw and needs to develop a bit further. And maybe, having an experience at an international tournament like this is part of his development, because he had a very good season for Leipzig. And then all of a sudden you're playing, at the highest international level, or one of the highest international levels, and it's not so easy. And I know he's playing with a Slovenian team who, play in a particular way, and chances are kind of few and far between. But when you have the 2 chances that he had last night, I think you really have to score at least one of them. And in particular, I think the second one, he should have took that away. Keeper did well, but it's a 20% good save, 80% bad miss, at that stage of a game. So I do wonder, if you imagine if you're playing Gabriel Jesus up front, and Gabriel Jesus has one of those games where the finish isn't there. Those ones? Imagine bringing Sesko on to replace him to do kind of the same. It would drive you mad, I think. So if he can have another season there, maybe another 2 seasons, who knows? It depends how well he goes, or how well people view his development over the coming 12 months. I think that's probably the best thing for him, and it's probably the best thing for Arsenal as well, even if he was a player that we did want and obviously had an idea of what we wanted to do with. I just, based on what I've seen at this tournament, I'm not that displeased that he made the decision he did.
Yeah, I think it was sensible for him. I think he probably could have come in and played more of a squad role. I don't think he looks ready to come in and be transformational in the way some might have hoped or expected. I think physically, he's obviously got really good qualities. He's tall, he's strong, he's quick. He reminds me a bit of Rasmus Højlund in that respect. He's a real specimen up front. Whether or not he quite has sort of mastered the other technical aspects of playing as a centre forward at the elite level, I don't know. And I think I don't think it'll do any harm to kind of keep an eye on his development and see how he goes. I mean, he finished the season in outstanding form in Germany. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see how he gets on next year. And Arsenal have loved this player for years now, 3 or 4 years. And I suspect they'll be monitoring him going forward as well.
Staying with the Euros, we had another question from Kasim Virani, who's at Cas Virani on Twitter. He said, "Morning, chaps. Thinking about the Euros so far and the Arsenal players who have featured, wondered if you had a view on who has come out well and who hasn't. Maybe rate them on a scale from 1 to 10. And we'll come back to the English players, I guess. But somebody who didn't feature last night for Belgium was Leandro Trossard. Didn't get off the bench even when France went ahead and Belgium needed a goal. Someone said to me that there was an issue with Trossard's dad criticising the Belgian coach, and apparently it got back into the squad in some way. So maybe that's why he didn't get on. But I don't think he had a particularly effective tournament. I give Trossard a 4 out of 10. I don't know how much you saw of Trossard.
Yeah, I actually was a bit disappointed. Like I sort of had him down as someone who could make a real impact in this tournament because he finished the season in such good form with Arsenal. I think players who can provide goal threat, whether that be starting or off the bench, are always, valuable. And I thought he would, I think I picked him in my Euros fantasy team because I thought he's going to play, he's going to score goals. And he started the tournament in the team, ended up not even coming off the bench. So, yeah, I can't argue with that. 4, pretty disappointing for him and for Belgium.
Belgium were not good.
No, they weren't. And I saw Kevin De Bruyne, getting all the questions about the golden generation. And to be honest, I think those questions are a bit misplaced at this point in time. I think that generation's time had sort of been and gone, and I think we saw that a little bit on the field. Yeah,
for sure. William Saliba did play for France in this game and has played very well, I think, for France throughout this tournament. He would get an 8.5 for me. I think there's room for improvement, so hopefully he can get above a 9. We'll see. But France's strength, I think, has been defensive, and I think he's put to bed any of these weird doubts that Didier Deschamps had about him going into this tournament, and things he said very publicly about Saliba, which were strange to anyone who's watched him on a consistent basis. I think he's completely dispelled any of those doubts.
Yeah, I would have said an 8 as well. Probably not coming out of that France team for the next decade, you would imagine. And interesting as Arsenal fans to see him playing as the left-sided centre-half. We're very, very used to seeing him play on the right, but I think he's played predominantly on the left for France in this tournament. And maybe that, obviously his partnership with Gabriel's fantastic, but if they're not available to play 50 games together next season, that opens up some other options for Arteta potentially.
Yes, something to think about down the line. Kai Havertz for Germany is another one who stands out. I think he's had a sort of up and down-ish kind of tournament. It's been a very Kai Havertz tournament in that he's played pretty well, but maybe the finishing at times has lacked a little bit of conviction, but he's got a couple of goals to his name, a very good penalty the other night. I think he has an assist in the first game as well against Scotland. So I'm going to give Havertz a 7.5.
Yeah, I would have said a 7. I mean, I think both his goals have come from the penalty spot, but structurally he brings quite a lot to the German team. It's a little bit reminiscent of, this sounds like really damning with faint praise, but when France won the World Cup and they had Guy Varche as their striker, right? And, they had all these other attackers on the bench and people were like, you've got to play them. But he was the guy who the manager really trusted in the position. And I kind of feel the same when I watch Havertz. There might be others who offer more goal threat, but what he brings to the team is really, really important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think he'll stay in that team, and I think Germany will go far. So, yeah, 7 out of 10 feels fair.
Well, Italy are out, so I think Jorginho had a fairly ordinary tournament.
5 or 6 for me.
5, 6, yeah, it wasn't great, but I mean, Italy were very poor as well. Not a good tournament for him, unfortunately, which was cut short by
injury. Injury? As I said, that's kind of was the nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
For him.
David Raya, he's behind Unai Simon, so he did have one game, kept a clean sheet, made a couple of good saves, but it's hard to rate a player just on one game rather than over the course of the tournament. And then I guess is it just the
Zinchenko.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously with Ukraine. And I actually thought did pretty well in what I saw of him. I think he got himself an assist in one game. So yeah, 6.5 out of 10, something like that. I mean, he didn't set the world alight, but I thought he was decent enough.
Yeah, I think he was all right. He was dropped for that game and came on as a sub to get the assist.
Yeah.
So maybe a 6, fairly average, what you would expect from Zinchenko. Declan Rice in midfield for England, and Bukayo Saka obviously in various positions for England, not least the last game where he had to go to left back and then ended up back on the right hand side. It's so hard to individually assess the qualities of their performances when collectively England have just been so disappointing over the course of this tournament. I mean, I think Saka's done fine. I think Rice has done fine. I actually thought Rice was good in the game against Slovakia, where the midfield wasn't really working. Kyle Walker was getting in the way. Kobbie Mainoo, who I think is a good young player, but his inexperience showed and played a little bit close to Declan Rice. People dropping into spaces where they don't need to be, and England don't use the full width of the pitch. But I think Rice, in general, did pretty well. So I think I give him a 7. I think I give Saka a 7 as well, because for me, he looked the most lively of the England front three in all of the games that I've watched so far.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't think that's hard, I suppose, given who else has been playing. But I think Rice, I would put probably a bit ahead of Saka. I think he's really got the bit between his teeth, Declan Rice, in this tournament. I mean, there's good and bad to that. There have been moments where I've sort of seen him slightly glaze over and get that kind of Steven Gerrard-itis a little bit, where it's like, I'm going to do everything. And that's a brilliant thing about him. But I think when he's surrounded with better players maybe, or feeling more comfortable in a team, his role can be simplified, and I think that actually suits him a little bit. Saka's a fascinating one because, as Arsenal fans, I think there are a lot of sort of grievances with how his form is being perceived and discussed. I think a lot of that really isn't about Bukayo Saka, but it's about Cole Palmer and Gareth Southgate and people's frustrations with the manager. And I think Palmer's sort of started to symbolise this idea that Southgate is risk averse and, won't pick players based on form. And I think Saka's a bit of an unfortunate victim of that. I do think when he gets back to London Colney, he might just sort of hold Ben White and Martin Odegaard in quite a long 10 race. Because watching Saka in this England team, I think you really realise quite what those two players do for him. I think it was in not the most recent England game, but the one before. He's used to having Martin Odegaard next to him, and in this game he had Conor Gallagher, and it's just not the same.
I know, yeah. I think the thing with Saka for me as well is that I don't know that there is another player in the England squad who has to or has had to deal with the kind of media scrutiny over the course of this tournament that he has. And look, there was talk about Alexander-Arnold in midfield, but there were players in that team whose positions should have been much more under scrutiny than Bukayo Saka, yet it was always about Saka and whether or not he should start, and I think to that extent, the strength of his mentality has been present in his performances, Jonathan Liu wrote a really good piece in The Guardian. I don't know if you had a chance to read that.
I saw that. Yeah, it was good, yeah. I mean, I think Saka... It's really interesting, in these international tournaments, you learn quite a lot about how players are perceived by fans of other clubs. And I do think other people who don't support Arsenal see Saka as a more one-dimensional player than we do. I think they just see him as like a guy who's quick, gets the line and crosses the ball in. And I think people who appreciate the breadth of his talent and see him play week in, week out, we know there's much more to him than that. I think he will have a big moment in this tournament still to come. He might have had one already. He had Phil Foden not straight offside when setting up a goal for him. And I think Gareth Southgate will keep faith with him in some way, shape, or form. I am curious to see what happens in the next game for England, because there's potentially a couple of enforced changes. I mean, we don't know how Trippier is. We don't know how Luke Shaw is, or if he's even alive. And I think Mark Gay is suspended as well, potentially. So, a few changes to come.
So, I mean, that's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because what does he do? Does he play Lewis Dunk? Or does he move Walker to centre half and bring Trent Alexander-Arnold in? It will be fascinating to see. And I think, I said this before the game, the last game, that if they didn't up their performance levels, they could very easily be eliminated from the competition. And it came very, very close. And I think what we've seen from Switzerland so far in this tournament suggests that unless there is a marked improvement in the England performance, Switzerland are more than capable of winning that game on Saturday. Yeah.
And we've been going around rating Arsenal players, but one ex-Arsenal player who continues to impress is Granit Xhaka. And it's been nice to read him getting lots of plaudits over the last few days. I mean, he's obviously the heart of this Swiss team, and they look a decent outfit.
What about this question from Shatner's Bassoon on the Discord, who says, do you think Rice and Saka's performances at the Euros are evidence that we overrate the importance of individual talent and underrate coaching as a factor? Or to put it another way, do players who might be similar in actual talent/skill look better or worse because of the systems that they work in?
That's a really hard question, I think. In the case of Saka, for example, I'm probably more inclined to say that it's about chemistry and relationships than pure coaching. I mean, obviously coaching is a big, big part of that. But I do think that playing with good players is just incredibly beneficial. I know these are good players in this England team, but they're not players who've had time to build understanding. Now, some national teams seem able to do that, and that's where you have to get to coaching, right? It's like, why can Spain look fluid and England can't? But I think it's a mixture of factors. I think it's probably too simplistic to say it is coaching or it is, relationships. What's your take?
I mean, I think there is a deficit of coaching when it comes to England.
Yeah.
I think it's rudimentary or basic at best. And Gareth Southgate, I think, has been found wanting. I also think there is a lack of ruthlessness when it comes to his decision making that would not be the case with a club, with a high level club team. That if players underperform at club level, they come out, or the manager will find a different way of doing things. I mean, there's no question about the individual talent of many of these England players. Some players, who've won a lot have been really poor at this tournament. Phil Foden has won a lot as part of an incredible collective at Manchester City. Kyle Walker the same. I think he's been really poor at this tournament. So it's not a question of their talent, but are they better suited to certain systems, or do they thrive in certain systems, or do systems allow those players the platform to showcase their skills? So I just think as well, at international level, the time that a manager has with his team is so limited that unless you have a very clear identity and a very clear idea of what it is you want to do and how it is you want to play, whether it's defensive, like France, despite having all the attacking talent in the world, or whether you just kind of want to, do something like Georgia and say, right, we're not going to have a lot of the ball, but when we get it, we're going to get forward and we're going to excite people and we're going to run directly at goal. That's a plan. Whereas it's been very difficult in this tournament to identify what England's plan is, what their identity or footballing identity might be above and beyond, right, I've got Foden, I've got Kane, I've got Saka, I've got Bellingham, I've got to get them all on the pitch at the same time, somehow make that work, when in reality, and as the evidence has shown, the best thing would probably be to find a different balance. And that, I think, is where Southgate has fallen down.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you make a good point about ruthlessness with the team. But one of the things that was encouraging heading into the tournament is I think he was quite ruthless with his squad selection. You know, he left out Jordan Henderson, he left out Jack Grealish, he left out James Maddison. People who'd been sort of important parts of his group were dispensed with. And I thought maybe he was going to bring that kind of clarity of thought to team selection. It hasn't really proven to be the case. The other thing I would offer a mitigation is that, rightly or wrongly, these players do seem to be incredibly loyal to him. I mean, they've all come out to bat for him, basically. And you can see in the celebrations and the way they play that there is a kind of, there's been a sort of circling of the wagons, right? You know, we spoke last week about the press conferences the English players gave where they sort of hit back at criticism of the team. So as much as we may look at it from the outside and say it's dysfunctional, they're not playing well, it doesn't work, they do seem to have a kind of core belief. So I'm fascinated to see how that plays out. My overriding feeling is that Southgate probably should have left after the last tournament, and I suspect he knew that, and by all accounts he was very close to doing that. And I do wonder if this period now, in time, he may come to regret. I mean, obviously he won't if they win the Euros, but he may look back on it and think, did that damage the legacy that I had built? And did I approach that 2 years with enough clarity, with enough idea of what I wanted to do, with enough willingness to change things and embrace new players in what remained of my time as England manager? I don't know. And it may just be that he's sort of, I think managers have a kind of sell-by date. They have a period where they're effective, and then there comes a period where that starts to wane and decline. And I think we're in that period for Southgate. But yeah, it's all kind of undercut by this fact that they are still in it, and they're in with a decent chance, as bad as they've been. If they can avoid Spain, then they've got a shot.
Yeah, I think you're right, about the sell-by date thing. That happens at club level as well, as we know. Yeah. But there is backing for him from the players, and people will say, well, that doesn't really matter. But I think it does speak to at least the belief within the squad, the togetherness within the squad, their willingness to keep going. I guess you would say that they didn't give up against Slovakia.
I guess what's Southgate's strength? I think it's probably been cultivating an international environment where players are happy to go off and play for England, which we didn't have for like 20 years before that. So, probably much more so than the tactical side, that has been his contribution. And maybe we're seeing some of the deficiencies in other areas laid bare now. But, as an England fan, I sort of am keen to not entirely dismiss his legacy, because I think that change has been really important and beneficial to England. I think England have basically broadly been better under his tenure than they were previously. But I'm also excited for something new, and I'm sure we'll get that after this tournament.
Big Sam.
Yeah. He deserves another chance.
All right, we will take a little bit of a break here, and we'll come back with some of your questions, maybe more pertaining to Euro 2024, but we'll get some Arsenal focus as well in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog, also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon, also over on Patreon throughout Euro 2024, and some Copa America coverage as well. We've been doing exclusive podcasts. So if you fancy signing up for the rest of the tournament, you can do that at patreon.com/Arseblog. Let me ask you this one. We had a couple of questions like this, James. time, so I wanted to ask you. You think I would have it lined up at least, wouldn't you? But here it is. It's from Rod Black. And he says, oh, there's my door. Fucking doorbell again.
Go on.
I'm back. Guess what?
What?
There was a package for your neighbour.
I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought it would be.
You know what? Last week we didn't make note of this, but it was the first double D. The first time we had a double D.
Whoa.
Yeah, double doorbell. So hopefully that's the only interruption we have. Anyway, let's get back to the questions.
Yes.
It was Rod Black on the Discord saying, admittedly, Chelsea's transfer fees can't be used as a benchmark due to the skullduggery going on over there. But does the Omari Hutchinson fee look a little bad for Arsenal? Is it evidence that Arsenal are mismanaging youth? We talk about how hard it is for youth players to break into the first team, but a successful loan or two can make a player into a saleable asset. And a similar question on Twitter from Insight Arsenal, who's at Insight_Arsenal. Who says, is it just me who's infuriated by Hutchinson's transfer to Ipswich? This was always Chelsea's intention, and him going there instead of signing on with us just handed them £25 million in profit instead of us. Chelsea have done nothing towards his development, just sent him out on loan.
Well, yeah, so he's joining Ipswich permanently, right?
Yeah.
How much is the fee?
22 million, I think, not 25. I think I saw 22 million, yeah.
Yeah.
And we get some of it.
Well, that's nice. It is a bit annoying, isn't it? Because he obviously was part of the squad at Arsenal and chose to go to Chelsea at a point in his contract where there wasn't much we could do about it, and they've now turned a big profit on him. I think, in fairness, like that fee is it might sound like a lot to us, but he was on loan there last season, right?
Yeah.
And played a significant part in their promotion. Mm-hmm. So really, if you're signing a top championship player, I don't think a fee in the region of 20 million is, in this day and age, particularly remarkable. I think that's fairly standard. But yes, it's pretty galling that it will be in Chelsea's pocket primarily, not ours. What do you think?
I mean, I think people need to look at the agent involved in this as well. He's an agent that we have a bit of history with anyway. That's all I will say. And it's not always good history. He's gone on loan. He's done well. 11 goals in 50 appearances for Ipswich is all right, isn't it, in the Championship? And Ipswich have come up and they've got the money to invest in him. I mean, it's not like we don't send players out on loan. We do. It's just they don't seem to perform at the level where the club that we send them on loan to is willing to spend money on them. I think there's also a touch of good fortune here that Ipswich were promoted. Would they be spending £22 million on him if they hadn't been promoted to the Premier League? So I think there's that aspect of it as well. It's just like going back to what we were talking about last week. I'm sure you saw over the weekend some of the stories about players who are moving and some of the shenanigans that were going on at Newcastle. Apparently the guy Elliot Anderson, 100% did not want to move, but was told he had to. So Newcastle can get their fucking books in order, and the value of players is now... It's now impossible to know what exactly is the real value of a player because of all these iffy deals that are going on between clubs who are moving players around for nominal values or values that they basically invent, which helps them on paper balance the books. I know there might be a case that they're kicking the financial can down the road a little bit, but if Hutchinson is gone for 22 million, should Chelsea fans not be outraged because some guy who never got a game for Aston Villa or Newcastle has gone for nearly twice that? Like, how do we now assess what the value of a player is?
Well, I guess they're worth, what they can avoid you getting a points deduction for. It's kind of...
Yeah.
It is absurd at this point in time, and it's a loophole that needs to be closed, I think. I don't know how you do it.
The league looks absolutely shambolic. It looks so bad for the Premier League that this kind of thing is happening, doesn't it? It's really kind of embarrassing that this loophole exists and clubs are taking advantage of it, and there is nothing whatsoever that they can do about it, and everyone is looking on going, well, this is absolute nonsense. This is garbage, you know?
And I actually, I don't know how you police it, because how do you objectively determine the value of a footballer? How can you say, well, this player, what do you do? Take their transfer marked value and say it's got to be in line with that?
Yeah.
It's tough. So yeah, I'm curious to see how the league respond to it, because it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue, and it makes a mockery of the rules as they stand.
On the wider point, could Arsenal be better at dealing with young players? Or is it a case, perhaps, that we don't necessarily have the level of young player that can go out on loan and then command that kind of fee? Because they're not going to go to a club in the Championship that's going to compete for promotion. They might go a little bit lower down the league, a little bit lower down the leagues themselves into League One or League Two. And I'll just finish or continue with another question from Gabby Goal on the Discord, who says, I've seen news of a bunch of academy players leaving. Rule Walters, Mario Koja-Dubry announced to have left yesterday. Are you at all worried about this? Or is this more similar to what happened with the first team at the beginning of Arteta's reign? We've got to tear it down to build it back up. Like, how do we find the balance between looking at other clubs, sending young players out on loan, while objectively assessing the talent of the players that we have sent out on loan, and recognizing that none of them in particular have done anything brilliant or special? Maybe Micah Beerith did very well at Sturm Graz, and that might get him a move there or a permanent transfer somewhere based on that. But when you're looking at the likes of Charlie Patino, Brooke Norton-Cuffy, some of the other guys have gone out. Like, there's nobody in our academy right now that is going to command that kind of a transfer fee.
No, but I do personally. I do think Arsenal have a case to answer there potentially. I think, essentially, it's about marketing. It's about what can you do to elevate the value of these players. And do I think Arsenal have done enough there? I think I would say no, and I think that in the case of, say, Walters and Koja-Dubry, what it's cost them is that it's persuaded those players that they should not sign contract extensions that they were offered. And, well, at that point, you've let go of all kind of monetary value. So could they have done more with those two and some others to convince them to stay at Arsenal longer, to a point where their value might increase? Certainly. Could they have done more in their time already at the club to improve their standing in the game? I really think they could. Whether, say, someone like Walters, he was like an unused sub for Arsenal, something absurd, like 30 times or something like that.
Was it that much?
I can't remember the stat, but it was pretty often. Bear in mind, we're in this sort of era of 7 subs or something like that.
Right.
Art de Roche did actually send me the stat, so I should probably dig it out and get it right, should I?
Yeah, if I'm
going to throw the club under the bus like this,
yeah,
then I better get my numbers right. And we're going to find out now. I'm way out. 21 times. Like that, I think that is probably not smart. Like, I think by giving him a handful of minutes in games where you were comfortable, you could have turned him from a player who wants to leave and is going to leave for nothing into a player who signs a new contract and has a market value of a few million quid. And I know it's not 20 million quid, but it all adds up. And I think Arsenal could be better at this, for sure. But who knows, right? I don't really know how good these players are. I don't really know how they fare in first team training. I don't really know how they'd cope out on a Premier League pitch. And the people who do, or people who have the best opportunity of knowing that, are the people making the decisions.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. I mean the general raising of standards at Arsenal makes it more difficult for a young player to make his breakthrough.
Yeah.
How many times was Reuell Walters on the bench when Arsenal were completely comfortable in a game and had the opportunity to bring him on?
I don't know. Art Russia hasn't provided me with those numbers.
God damn it, Art!
Come on, Art!
Fuck's sake, Art. Those kinds of factors as well, I do play into it. I know people will use the other kind of, is it a dead rubber game, the one we had against PSV in the Champions League? Could you have done more in that game to give young players minutes and a chance and put them on, the biggest stage in European football, even if not from the start, towards the end of a game? Would it have made a huge difference to our standing in that group, et cetera, et cetera? I think there are certainly things that we could do. I also do think that there are unknowns that we have to accept as well. Like, where is the level of these young players? Are they, I don't mean this to sound harsh, and maybe you're right about how the club needs to market them better and maybe think about, how they use them, but are they worth the investment?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that there are other things that we're not aware of, but it's going to be a contentious issue, a thorny issue, because it feels, I don't know, it feels like there is a gap/gulf of talent and quality at youth level right now, which is now being exacerbated by the departures of players who could have been part of those, under 21 teams next season. Yeah. And it's how you promote from within, and maybe, as some of the stories have suggested, how Arsenal might bring certain youth players in the next few months to sort of bolster the numbers.
Yeah, I think we saw a goalkeeper arrive in the last week or so. I think there is going to be a bit of transfer activity at the academy level to boost those ranks. But yeah, that's a kind of secondary question, isn't it? If the players really aren't good enough, then, why is that? All I can say is it's something people are talking about around the game. And obviously everyone's got an agenda. If an agent feels their player should have had more chances, they're probably going to not be shy in making that known. So you always have to engage with some critical thinking whenever you hear this kind of stuff. But, Arsenal's use of their academy players and the pathway at Arsenal is certainly a discussion point in football at the present point in time. And I think even that is a bit unhealthy and troubling for Arsenal, and they should take steps to change that.
What about this one then? Sorry to keep asking questions, but you just brought me onto one that was right in front of me here. And Pete Coe on the Discord said, do you see any pathways to the first team for any academy players included in the preseason squad on the US tour this summer? Arsenal have announced another game, of course, playing Bournemouth in LA on July 24th. The LA Galaxy Stadium, a game that, has been in the pipeline for a long time, but has only just been announced. And with the Euros and Copa America and things like that, there is room for academy players to be part of this squad. We've had discussion, haven't we, about Ethan Nwaneri and how we think he is probably going to be part of the first team squad next season. And that might be a way for Arsenal to demonstrate the pathway for young players, because they've had to do it with him in a very specific way as well, haven't they, to convince him that this is the club to be at after giving him his debut at 15, waiting for him to turn 17. this is one case where I think they are making the effort to show that pathway is available, albeit with those caveats that we talked about before, that you have to have the quality. It's not just tokenism to bring players through from the academy. You have to bring the best players through, and they have to be ready to adapt and to step up.
Absolutely. Before I answer that, Andrew, can I just run and blow my nose?
Of course.
Can you play the hitherto unheard blowing your nose music?
Yes.
Great.
I will do that right now. Here we go.
Thanks, man. Be back in a second. Hello, I'm back.
You're back with clear nasal passages, I hope.
Clearer.
Okay.
So, Ethan Neri. Yeah, I mean, he's the one that, jumps out, and we've discussed him in the past. I'm trying to think of, obviously, there's been a lot of excitement about Miles Lewis-Skelly. Maybe I just think that part of the pitch at the present point in time might be a bit more congested. Do
you know exactly where they see him, Lewis-Skelly? Because I've seen conflicting reports about where he might play and how he might actually be more of a deep midfielder than people think.
Oh, yeah. I think... I see him more as like at the base of the midfield. I mean, there have been discussions about moving him to left back as well, as a kind of, Zinchenko style inverted left back. I think his best position is as the sort of number 6. But well, I don't know. I think in that position, experience does tend to weigh quite heavily. If you look at the players that we use there, people like Thomas Partey and Jorginho, it's a lot to entrust to a teenager. I'm just flicking through the squad now. I have to say, no disrespect to some of these names, but I don't see a ton of opportunities there for guys to break through. I mean, Chido Obi-Martin, there's also, been a lot of talk about him, but I think he's very young, and Arsenal are in a position where they're sort of fighting to keep hold of him. A lot of interest in him from the Bundesliga, I believe.
If he is a player that Arsenal really want to hang on to, is including him on this US tour, is that, should that be part of the strategy that, like, okay, come along, we know you're still young, but just look at what you could have here if you continue your progression?
Very possibly. I mean, he doesn't even turn 17 until November, so he is really young. But it's an option, isn't it? I mean, I'm fascinated to see what the makeup of the tour squad's going to be, because obviously so many players will still be recovering after international tournaments. I think it's only a fortnight or so after the Euros final. So, yeah, there's plenty of room there for young players. Brooke Norton-Cuffey's an interesting one. He's had a couple of seasons out on loan in the Championship. He's sort of quite established, really, as a Championship player at this point in time. Is he someone that we would incorporate in the squad? Possibly not. But, maybe could be one who leaves permanently for a decent fee. Beyond that, though, honestly, it's not easy. I mean, there's been chatter about Max Dowman, hasn't there? But he's 13, 14?
Yeah.
I think we'll be waiting a while.
Steady on there. Steady on. That's what I would say. Yeah, well, it will be interesting to see what kind of a squad Mikel Arteta puts together for the LA and Philadelphia games. So we'll find out in due course. Okay, I'll let you have a question.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, we spoke about coaching and the England team. I thought this was an interesting hypothetical from Cactus Lizard on Discord. They say if the FA sacked Southgate overnight and brought in Mikel Arteta as interim manager for the next England game, what changes do you think he'd make to get them playing his brand of football?
Be straight on the phone to Ben White.
I mean, yeah, that's an easy answer, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it wouldn't be possible within a tournament, but Arteta's England team would probably have Ben White as well.
I think what he would do is assess the squad and try and put out the most balanced team that he could. And there are various ways that you could do that and various permutations of that. But if you go all the way back to the start of Mikel Arteta's reign, he was time at the club, right? he was very clear about what he wanted to do, ultimately what he wanted to do and how he wanted to play. But at the start, he knew he couldn't do that with the players that he had, so he had to do things a different way. So he adapted to the players that he had.
Yeah.
And it worked and it didn't work and it took time to improve. But I think that first and foremost would be the change that he makes, is to produce the most balanced team that he could with the right qualities as much as possible in each area of the pitch, rather than shoehorning guys into positions where they're not necessarily comfortable or good enough. And I also think he would recognize that reputation shouldn't be the key driver to team selection. I think that's been too much part of this Southgate tournament. So that's what I would say.
I mean, it's interesting the point you make, because there have been times in Southgate's reign, and Arsenal fans won't appreciate me saying this, I'm sure, but where the football has reminded me of some of the earlier Arteta days, where it's been sort of very solid defensively, slightly unimaginative going forward, and we've kind of played off the margins a little bit. Of course, what a club manager can do that an international manager can't is recruit and identify what they need and go and find it from anywhere in the world. If Arteta wanted to play the kind of football that Arsenal play with this England group, I do think there are obvious things he would and could do. You know, Ben White at right back is an obvious shout behind Bukayo Saka, but Saka's relationship with Odegaard is just as important. You know, could Arteta find a way to include Phil Foden maybe on that flank as a kind of advanced number 8? A trio of White, Foden and Saka all playing next to each other, that becomes quite exciting. Then on the opposite wing, you can have someone who holds the width, who offers threat in behind with pace, as Martinelli does. You could use Anthony Gordon in that role, for example. Declan Rice, maybe you release him further forward and allow him to go and press and win the ball high up the pitch and put a number 6 in behind him. You know, maybe you do take the plunge and play, what's the name?
Adam Wharton?
Name? Yeah. You go for an option like that. I don't know. I think there are changes he would make. I think what he'd do with the centre forward position would be fascinating, because I think he knows the value of a goal scorer. And we saw with Aubameyang that even though I think he knew Aubameyang probably wasn't his dream striker, he was prepared to indulge and work with him for a period because he scored goals. And I suspect he might be similarly pragmatic about Kane in the first instance. But I think as soon as someone who was a youthful, energetic, viable alternative emerged, and maybe that would be Watkins, he'd probably jump on that train.
I think Arteta would pick Watkins over Kane in this current England team because of what he asks from his centre forward. I think he would, remember all the times you would hear Mikel Arteta shouting, Laka, at Lacazette, when Lacazette would sort of drop back deep and sort of plod around midfield. He didn't want him there. He wanted his forward higher up the pitch. I think, after 45 minutes of watching Kane get in the way of everyone else, he would just fucking say, no, that's enough. I think someone like Watkins would suit Mikel Arteta's team far, far more than Harry Kane.
I think as well, something that we've observed about Arteta is his emphasis on balance when it comes to playing out from the back. He often plays with 2 right-footers, 2 left-footers in his back 4. I think England have been playing with 4 right-footed players. I know Gay's quite 2-footed, but they've been playing Trippier at left-back, obviously. So I think he would play a left-footed player at left-back, which I think would help England exit a lot of the time. They just get stuck going down that flank at this moment in time. Who that would be, I don't know. But I just don't believe there's not an option that would give a bit more balance than fielding Trippier there currently. Well,
that was one of the big mistakes of Southgate's squad selection, was picking only one left back and a guy who's injured and wasn't fit. And even if he's available for Saturday, how do you put someone like that in a team for a quarterfinal of a major championship? That's crazy to me. Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, even if you pick Tyrick Mitchell or somebody like that, just, a guy who's fit and is a left back, I think you're going to be in a better position. I think there's a lot that Arteta would do. I think it'd be interesting to see, but somehow I don't think we'll ever see it.
Okay, what about this one? Where are my questions gone? Okay, comes from Speckled Jim, who says, just because there are so few rumours and international football is so boring, Mikel Merino, player we've been linked with, is he either triple threat, he's a monster in duels, has got good hair and is also called Mikel, or is he a Newcastle reject?
Yeah, interesting player. Plays for Sociedad.
Good player.
Yeah, I think he is. I think he obviously it didn't really work out for him at Newcastle. Been at Dortmund before that as well, but has been excellent for Sociedad. 28, just recently. I think the expectation from the conversations I've had is that he will sign a new contract and stay with Sociedad. It's a good time for Real Sociedad. They're having a good time of it, and I think he enjoys playing there and presumably living there.
The Scotland of Spain.
Scotland of Spain. There's nothing like it. So I don't doubt that he's a player Mikel Arteta will have watched plenty of. I'm sure he sees a lot to admire there. I think he's very physical, which obviously would demonstrate a suitability for the Premier League. But at present, I think he's probably more inclined to stay with Sociedad than come and be a squad player in England. But it would be interesting. Do you think the age would be a barrier?
I mean, it would be outside what we normally do, but I do think as well that there is the scope to add a couple of oven-ready players, if that's the right way of putting it. You can be plenty experienced at 24, as much as 28. True. It just depends what way your career has gone. But I wouldn't be at this moment in time as against signing a 28-year-old if he was the right level of player as I think I would have been a while ago when we were signing 28-year-olds who weren't the right level of player. You do need players who can come in and hit the ground running, and he strikes me as somebody who could do that because of his Premier League experience. I do think he is a good player, and the characteristics he has would suit this team pretty well. He's a big guy too. He's like 6'2", something like that. Yeah. So another big lad in the box.
Reminds me a bit of Edu in some respects, like, very technically able, but also quite a big guy.
Bigger than you think.
Yeah. I think he'd cope well with the Premier League. It's on my sort of watch list of names. As I say, current info is that, I think it looks like he's staying. But if something shifts with Arsenal and a spot opens up, then it wouldn't blow my mind at all. We spoke about left backs in the England team and what Arteta might do at left back. We had a question here from Mobila, ML is how it's abbreviated. And they say, there's been some suggestion win for a left back this summer, but what sort of left back do you think Arteta wants in his system? Does the fact that Lisandro Martinez was the priority for that role originally suggest he would rather a centre-back, left-back hybrid rather than a traditional fullback?
Yeah, good question. I mean, Martinez is more of a left-back, centre-back hybrid rather than a centre-back, left-back hybrid. If you can see what I mean by that. Like, he's physically looks more like a left-back, but somebody who can play centre-back rather than a Jakub Kiwior who is, a centre-back who can play left-back. I'm sort of curious about this. I don't really know, but I am curious because I do think we saw last season that the faith in Zinchenko was, it wasn't there, right? I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And the left-back played a more traditional left-back role in a period of the season where we went on a very, very good run. So the idea that we need this inverted fullback to play the Arteta way isn't quite there. It isn't quite the same. And I'm not saying he's going to go for a guy who's just going to bomb up and down the outside, But I do wonder if, a tactical shift could be tied to whatever left back that we're looking at, whether that gives somebody more room in midfield to operate, whether you drop somebody, whether it's Declan Rice who gets a bit more box to box in that channel, if that makes sense, depending on who you've got at the 6. So I don't know. I really don't know. But, I'd like somebody who's just more, not traditionally a left back, but somebody who is a bit more modern in that role. I think you need a little more pace than we've had in there. Certainly might be a way of getting more pace into the team, and somebody who can burst. Like, imagine a really, really good Nuno Tavares who could also defend. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it feels like an agent pitching. Imagine a really, really good Nuno Tavares that could also defend.
Yeah, I've got just the guy.
Wolves is Aitnuri or whoever it is.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I think someone who could offer Martinelli some support and the odd overlap might be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously City have kind of gone down the Kiwior route with Gvardiol playing a lot of games at left back and Ake, kind of a centre-half mould, operating as a full-back. I think Arteta will use that time to time, but I think it'd be good to have someone who brings a different quality to the... But I think that position is probably one where, just in terms of the sheer weight of numbers and options we have, and we haven't mentioned Jurrien Timber either in that, probably someone's got to go out before someone comes in.
Yeah. What about this from John C? He says, do you have any real concern that Arsenal won't get close to sorting out all their business this summer? I'm not one who's fretting too much over the lack of activity thus far, but it is a little worrying that we haven't seen any significant movement in or out, including players who have no international involvement or had the potential to be traded in the PSR window, which is now past.
Well, I think we weren't under pressure in the PSR window.
No, did our financial year end at the end of May rather than the end of June?
I don't actually know, to be honest, but I think the PSR regulations have set around June. But we weren't one of the clubs who needed to sell somebody before that deadline. And, it's interesting that David Raya, I saw Fabrizio Romano reporting that Arsenal have triggered their option on David Raya. I actually don't know that.
Breaking news.
True or not. But interesting that happened on July 1st, sort of as the new accounting period starts. I think that probably suits Brentford and Arsenal for that transfer to be part of this financial year rather than the last one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because of the nature of what Arsenal are trying to do this summer, rightly or wrongly, they don't really see it as about the need to go and improve the first 11. They see it as, we need to improve the quality of the overall squad. And I think that they think that in order to do that, it's almost a kind of players need to leave in order to raise that level. And I think given how poor we've been at selling players in recent seasons, there's I feel like I say this every summer, but there's a real emphasis on the importance of that. So I think we might see players go before we see players arrive. And in terms of, do we get all the business done? It's like, well, what is all that business? I think what that business is will, again, be informed by who leaves. If Partey goes, we'll definitely get a whole midfield player. If Zinchenko goes, we'll almost certainly get a left back. But if those players don't, then I think, I'm not sure I see us just adding another 5 players to the squad and increasing the wage bill without some assurances that people are going to go.
It's a good job.
That won't be popular, I imagine.
Yeah, no, but it's the reality, I guess. But it's a good job we've been so good at selling that we can rest easy now. We can all relax. Everything is in hand. Don't worry about it.
What about this? I mean,
we've
talked about him before, but he scored a brilliant goal in the week. Gunnar Al says, Nico Williams has a €55 million release clause. What are we waiting for?
Don't know. plane tickets to Bilbao.
I mean, I think the problem with these clauses a lot of the time is you've got to pay. I think we said this last week, maybe. You've got to pay it up front, and Arsenal might not be in a position to do that. They might be looking at a different structure for a deal.
I mean, it is though. In the current market, 58 million to get you Nico Williams is
very reasonable.
It's sort of like a no-brainer, isn't it? If the player is interested in coming to your club and you can afford the wages. There are all these stories about his wages, which, every time...
reportedly very high. I think his camp deny that and say the demands are not excessive. But
he's on 10 million pounds a second at Athletic Bilbao.
Yeah.
That's what I read on the internet, so it must be true.
I think that is what he's getting.
Yeah.
I think he's also pretty happy at Bilbao. I think he's enjoying his football there and under contract, a decent contract as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's in a hurry to go. But if someone pays the clause, I guess that could all change very quickly.
He would be a very, very exciting signing. And did we have a question last week about, if any player in particular stood out at the Euros that would make you go, ooh, I want him? I think he would be the one so far for me, for sure. He really is very impressive. Okay, let's do one more to finish. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, given that we're on transfers and there is a transfer story from The Athletic today, Arsenal being linked with a goalkeeper called Juan Garcia at Espanyol. Provided Aaron Ramsdale goes, is there any interest in Ramsdale, or is it potentially the kind of thing where we could loan him out if there wasn't the sale option?
I think Arsenal would be reticent to do that. I think they'd rather recoup a big sum of money for Aaron Ramsdale. I just don't know how realistic that is. I mean, the goalkeeper market is difficult. They're almost always, Arsenal were kind of the exception to this rule when they signed David Raya last summer, but there almost always has to be a vacancy, right?
Yeah.
And Aaron Ramsdale's one of the better paid goalkeepers in the Premier League. So there aren't many clubs who could afford to pay his transfer fee and his salary. And there are even less of those clubs who need a new first choice goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to see where he will go. And my gut feeling is that Arsenal may have to compromise and do a loan here, hope he has a good season, and, maybe have an option included within that hope they recoup there. The one thing they do have is a position of relative strength, because obviously they put him on a new contract just over a year ago. So that may play into their favour a little bit. I mean, do you have a guess at what his fate might be?
No, I mean, I'd need to think about the Premier League clubs that need a goalkeeper. And,
I mean, the ones who have sort of been in the market for a keeper potentially are Wolves. Bournemouth might look at one. Brentford potentially. Southampton.
Manchester United should be looking for a goalkeeper.
They should, but they're keeping Ten Hag, so they're probably not.
Chelsea should be looking for a goalkeeper.
Maybe Chelsea. Maybe. But they have spent a lot of money on keepers, and apparently they're quite happy with their options. So it's not easy to identify. I guess what Ramsdale's probably hoping for is that a big domino falls, somebody like a Jan Oblak or an Edison go to Saudi or somewhere, take a big payday, and it sets in motion a chain of events that opens up a decent vacancy. Because otherwise, I mean, I think it would be quite a bad idea for him to stay at the club this summer for everyone involved. But there's got to be a deal.
There's got to be a market, doesn't there? There really does.
Yeah. And as for this Spanish keeper, I think he's certainly on the list. But again, are Arsenal going to do that until they know they've got a destination for Ramsdale? I would imagine not.
No. You can't. Because then you end up with a bloated squad and a bloated wage bill, and maybe this time next year we're talking about PSR and we're talking about.
That's true. I mean, I don't know what Arsenal are paying David Raya, but you'd have to imagine he would expect to earn something similar to Aaron Ramsdale as the first choice goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So, that's like 200 grand a week probably on
two
goalkeepers' wages.
Yeah.
That's not wise, really. It's not healthy.
No.
And Arsenal will be looking to have a bit more structure there. I think they're going to try and bring in, obviously Karl Heinz signed a new contract, but I think they're going to try and bring in some sort of third choice option, be that either a young goalkeeper or an older goalkeeper, to allow Karl Heinz to go out and play. I think that was pretty much a condition of him signing a deal. So yeah, quite a lot of work to do in that department still.
All right, well, look, we will wait and see what happens. Maybe things will pick up relatively quickly now that we've gone beyond the 30th of June. Maybe there'll be a bit more action from an Arsenal perspective in the transfer market. Let's hope so. But for now, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, as always, for being with us. Really appreciate it. And remember, you can keep up with Euro 2024 and a bit of Copa America as well over on Patreon, patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, though, take it easy. We will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.